I was asked if we could put together a video to discuss a potential organization change for Region 4. And this is the result of a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion, several trials. As you can see, it says version 3 here in the middle. And that's because we have gone through multiple versions. So I kind of wanted to walk you through this, and probably the best place to begin is talking about what is it we're trying to achieve. And from a region standpoint, obviously our goals, our mission is to support the members within the region, and also to support the volunteers within the region. And there are multiple reasons as to why you might want to take a look at your organization, and you really should every so often, just to make sure that it's still meeting the needs of your members and volunteers. And a lot has changed in society in the last few years, and it's probably worth taking a look at it at this point in time. I'm using a tool called a mind map, and it happens to be, in this case, a tool called XMind. It's an open source tool. Just I find it very helpful to help me think through the whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish, a particular problem, and so you can see what I'm doing. So another reason is one of the reasons is to understand whether we're actually serving members, and whether we have enough focus on them. In the past, we've depended upon our sections and chapters to engage members, and that is optimal because they are the face-to-face people that can actually touch our members and meet them and network with them and all that sort of thing. But life has changed, and we are finding that less than half of our members are now society members, and so they're not, they don't have a chapter to participate in. None of our sections have all of the chapters, and so if you're a member of a society but your section doesn't have that chapter, well, then perhaps there's not much of an opportunity for you. That's especially true in larger sections because most of the program is driven by chapters. In smaller sections, it tends to be driven by the section itself, and kind of everybody is invited to everything. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it will meet your interests. So we have a problem where members aren't necessarily given the opportunity to engage, and one of the ones that we're especially concerned about at the present time is industry members. They tend not to be society members because their interests are not as specific and deep necessarily as perhaps a researcher or someone at the university who's digging really deep into a particular subject. And also we're finding that the traditional model that we've used in our meetings is not necessarily working as well either. For years, all the way back to the Edison times, they were presentations made by experts on a particular subject, and they would talk about their work, what they have been doing in this particular area, and share their understanding and so forth with others. And that's getting more and more difficult. We also have a problem that a lot of our members are not necessarily physically close or have the time to get to a meeting. We have so many time constraints these days. Some people believe that our biggest competition as a technical professional organization is time of members, volunteers, and potential members, and so we need to deal with that. Also, region, due to membership declining for the past many years, we are struggling from a financial standpoint because we are entirely driven by membership. And so even as costs increase, we are looking at lower budgets. And so you somehow have to figure out how can you accommodate that. And this view indicates a smaller XCOM than we've had in the past. Often we've invited 20, 25, 30 people to an XCOM meeting, and we probably just aren't going to be able to do that forever. And so this kind of takes a look at that, and could it be more effective, and could it be more intentional in serving members and volunteers? So I'll kind of walk through this, and you can kind of get an idea. The director obviously is a traditional sort of thing because that is a role that IEEE has defined and developed. And the thought is that the region advisors would report to the director and serve as at his discretion, as they always have. They are non-voting, and they are duties as assigned or as they develop. And so this would be an example. I'm a region advisor, and I was asked to take a look at this sort of thing, and that makes it kind of my job that way. Director-elect has in the past been responsible for strategic planning in Region 4. This is not necessarily the way it's done in all regions, but it certainly is in Region 4, and I think it makes a lot of sense because if you're involved in strategic planning as you're, in the 2 years prior to becoming director, you then have both a feel and you can flavor the direction of the Region 4, and so that's a good place. Past director, there are several things that they are responsible for. They're responsible for audit, for NNA, and bylaws, and so those fit right into this discussion. Secretary, no changes really. Treasurer, no changes. They have their predetermined responsibilities that they need to make. But below that, we start getting into some real changes. And as I've discussed earlier, we're really thinking a lot about how we engage members, both because the style of members is changing. Everyone talks about the differences of millennials and so forth. Well, I personally don't think it's just millennials. I mean, I find myself operating differently than I have in the past. And it's because technology has allowed me to change, and I've just found better ways to do things. And so I think it's just a reality that we need to respond, to the changes in members, in their careers, and in how they work, and we need to support them. So in this particular case, we've grouped them into kind of a team. So the goal here is to ensure that all members in the region have an opportunity to become engaged in IEEE. There is an emphasis on members that do not have a chapter or are industry professionals. So those are emphasis, but that's not all. And so that kind of fits with what I've discussed prior to that. Now, at the present time, we have several positions in the region that kind of fall into this. And unfortunately, they're kind of independent, and we haven't necessarily got them to work together perhaps as well as we should. So we have a region chapters position. We have women in engineering, we have life members, we have technical communities. By the way, I'll come back to that in a little bit. We have industry professionals and relations. We have PACE chair, we have educational activities, and we have technical activities. Now, let me center on those ones right in the center, the technical communities. IEEE over the past several years has realized that societies are not meeting the interests of all of the members. And so they've developed a number of technical communities. And, you've probably seen them as big data or smart grid or there's just a whole range of them. I think there's 17 the last time that I looked. And honestly, they kind of cut across the various society interests. Certainly Smart Grid does, and others are more industry related, and so they have special groups that have been formed They are not as official as societies, but they are free. Any member can join one or as many of them as they wish, and they can join them at any time that they want. And so as a result, that's another way to do that. But we have no counterpart for those within the region. There are not chapters and so forth for those particular groups. Industry professionals and relations, we don't have a specific person in place that meets the needs, that reaches out to industry. And there are two pieces of this. One is to kind of form a relationship with the corporations, and the second is to meet the needs of people who work in industry. And in particular, we're kind of interested in, especially in those people who work in industry, work for corporations and so forth. And this is, they have specific interests and so forth, and their work often crosses many technologies. So they may be doing hardware and software, and they may be doing human relations sorts of things. It's a whole range of stuff that they are involved in. And we've not done real well at necessarily understanding their needs and then figuring out how to provide program that meets their needs. So this team, and if you look at this whole group here, this team would meet and decide what are the highest priorities and what can this group as a team do to meet the needs of members. Also keep in mind that a couple of them, right, women in engineering and life members are affinity groups, and we also have young professionals as well, but we group them in a different place. But they're affinity groups, and they do have, they have their affinity group locals. And the difficulty is we have very few of them. They are not everywhere, and so we don't necessarily serve all life members or all women in engineering, and women in engineering is a paid membership. But what do you do for the women who have not necessarily paid for a membership, but still have specific interests and needs and so forth that we should try and support? So let's move on to the next one, and that's membership and transition. And we have some real problems in membership. We are having a difficult time recruiting new members. We are also having a terrible time transitioning students from students to full higher grade members. We lose so many of them. Many of them drop out the first year, and it's not for unexpected reasons. I mean, if you actually stop and think about it, it's actually perhaps amazing that we do as well as we do. Because the students, graduate. They've just been told by their universities they're well trained. The corporations or whoever employs them or the schools that they've gone on to for further degrees has also told them that they're doing very well. They have no understanding as to why they need some professional organization, and as a result, they're not looking to us. At the same time, we lose them. We don't know where they are because we depend on them to update the records and say, they moved to Detroit, or they moved to Chicago, or they moved to Iowa, or whatever it might be. We don't know that they're there, and as a result, we can't do anything to reach out to those members and invite them in and begin engaging them in our societies and sections and chapters. So that's a very difficult position to be in. Same is kind of true of new higher grade members. So let's just say we have a 30-year-old who's out of college but decides to join. Perhaps he's come to some of our activities and joins as a member. And we do not do a real good job of reaching them, grabbing them, and getting them involved in the organization. And perhaps that's because of the things that we've discussed above, that we don't necessarily have a chapter or other group that is necessarily aligned with them. And if we don't, it's pretty easy to quickly lose them. And that's where we sometimes see the smaller sections doing a better job because they kind of invite everybody to everything. So let me break this one out. And let me slide this over a little bit. So grouped under this team is member development, student activities, and young professionals. And so they're kind of a good combination, right, of the team that you would want to focus on. How do we get and keep members, and how do we transition them from students to higher grade? And I kind of broke out, the particular pieces of student activities because we have the SPACs, we have student branches, we have Eta Kappa Nu, which most of us tend not to think about. I happen to be a little sensitive to them because I'm involved with that organization as well. And by the way, they have their own chapters that are located at various universities, often the same places that IEEE branches are. And sometimes they kind of cooperate, and sometimes they're kind of distant from each other and don't have much to do with them. And then within branches, you can have chapters and affinity groups. And we have a few of those, but not a lot of them. And so we don't necessarily develop students as well as we want, realizing that in many cases, student branches are more like university clubs. In fact, they're kind of run by the university. Their finances mainly come from the university or their activities at the university, and we're not really the financial support for them. I think we find by far most of our branches never even file their reports because the amount of money they get back in exchange for that is so minimal. It's like $50 plus $1 per student member, and even in small branches, their budget may be several $1,000s a year, and so we contribute such a small amount to it that it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So anyway, that's the responsibility of this team, and says as it says here in the goal, ensure that students are intentionally transitioned to regular membership through engagement that begins before graduation, and ensure that the needs of members are understood and met. And so that means the new members who join and those who do transition, that we do continue to support them and meet their needs. All right, let's move on down to the next one, and that's unit engagement. And this is kind of our traditional sorts of things that we have done in the past. And so let me just point out the goal right at the beginning of this, and that is ensure all units are trained, engaging members locally through outstanding training and support. And this should be considered to be a mentoring relationship. Too often, I think it looks like it's just hierarchical and it's not as supportive as it needs to be. And so I intentionally use those words, a mentoring relationship. And obviously within here is various points that we've had in the past, or various positions. So area chairs, and the area chairs are our conduit to the sections, right? They're the ones who talk to the section chairs, and in our intentions are the support people for sections, chapters, and affinity groups. Now, along with that, MGA, IEEE MGA, created a position that is called the Region Vitality Coordinator. And I think the feeling was that there was not enough emphasis on making sure that our sections were remaining vital and that they were active and they were doing all the stuff that they needed to do. And so they kind of put this position in place with the hope of giving it more emphasis. In my particular case, and I am the RVC for Region 4 as well, I find it conflicts with the roles of area chairs and with various other positions and so forth, because there are multiple people who are really trying to reach out to the sections and chapters, and it's just totally confusing from a section chapter standpoint, because if the region volunteers are doing their job, the section and chapter volunteers are just getting hit from all different directions, and it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. And especially, we only invite the region or the section chairs to our region meetings, and so they don't really have a chance to see the big picture. So included in this then is volunteer support, and that is making sure the volunteers have the tools and understanding and so forth to do that. And there are three main areas that kind of fall into this. vTools is one, right? That's a set of tools that we've put in place over the past several years to support our volunteers and make them effective and spend less time on the administrative bureaucracy sorts of things and much more time on meeting the needs of members. Communications is obviously extremely important and is getting more and more difficult. At one time, we all did paper newsletters and sent them out, and that was our prime communications. Certainly, that's not true anymore because it is email in many cases, but in other cases, it's social media, it's LinkedIn, it's all kinds of things. And then, information about our members and so forth is all contained within SAMI. And we find a lot of our volunteers are just not anxious to use a tool which is perhaps a couple of generations old and from a technology standpoint and really doesn't necessarily meet the needs of members as it should. And that is gradually changing, especially with the recent add of the Section Vitality Dashboard, which is based on SAMI but is specific to the interests of volunteers. So. And then down here on the bottom is volunteer training, and we try to do training and so forth. And individual sections, especially the larger sections, have a training event every year, and those are done very well from what I understand, and so forth. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody gets trained and so forth. And so within this group, within this team, we would have someone who is making sure that people are trained or that their needs are being met. And so this is kind of an interesting team. I would tend to look at these three teams that we've just talked about as having side meetings and not necessarily being as closely involved in the activities of the XCOM. But more dedicated toward this, having more local discussions as to do we have inactive sections and what can we do about them, and how can this team as a whole cooperate to provide training, to provide support, to reactivate the volunteers, and so forth. So that's what this particular team is about. The next one is just operational, and it kind of fits into the sorts of things that we do as normal operations and have to be done. So we have a history position, which is valuable. We have awards, which are very important, difficult in many cases to get the candidates and so forth that we need, but it's very important to recognize our volunteers and members through just a recognition of their achievements. The third position is conferences, and conferences is beginning to change within region and certainly within IEEE. We've had for many years an EIT conference, and it is becoming more substantial and effective. And then every 3 years we have a sections congress, and probably there ought to be another one on here, but we are trying to grow the number of conferences within region 4 at the present time. It's another way to engage members and perhaps engage them more locally, so you don't have to travel across the world to attend a conference that might have material of interest to you, but you might be able to find one more locally. Okay, so then this is the next one is ad hocs and task forces, and I'll be very clear. This is as a result of my talking to a friend in Region 3 who utilizes this mode of operation, and that is as a problem is identified, and let's just say you see that sections or chapters or volunteers are having a particular problem and so forth. And in the past, we've often, assigned a committee and so forth that would take over those things, and develop an understanding of the problem, and then try and see if they can come up with a solution. And that would fall into this particular group, and these would be very temporary, and usually would probably end within the year, and certainly end at the term of the present region director. And they would only continue on if the next director reinitiates them. So that's what this whole thing is about. The last one is just a set of pros and cons. And let me open this one up and I'll move this up so you can see it. So the pros, and we've kind of talked about this, the intentional engagement of all members, not just some members, all members, because we really want this organization to grow and be effective within our technologies. The organization support that the organization supports the mission of the region, and I think this does very directly, and I tend to use the word intentionally. I like that word because it means that we're putting specific actions in place to make it happen. And then it kind of clarifies the roles, probably along this line, and maybe I should have included the words here, but it supports teams who now are working together and can make sure that something happens. Right now it's kind of individual actions, and it's awfully easy for our volunteers to sign up for a position and really not know how to be very effective at it and to not be able to make something really happen. The next one is smaller XCOM, and perhaps that means that the XCOM could meet face to face, twice a year. Right now, we're down to one region meeting a year, and usually the XCOM meets for 2 hours in advance of that. I'm not sure that that's as good as it should be, but this may offer the opportunity. We'll have to see. And then cons, there is one big one that sticks in my mind, and that is those XCOM roles, and that is member engagement and unit engagement. Are certainly big roles, and so the position who sits on the XCOM has a large amount of responsibility to make this team function and to report back to the XCOM on its activities. By the way, I should mention too that up here in these positions of unit engagement, membership and transition, and member engagement, those are kind of temporary names. They're kind of descriptive of what I think we should be trying to accomplish, but perhaps we want better names, and we'd certainly welcome suggestions and so forth from you. About something that a name that might be more descriptive or might be a much more interesting name. So this is kind of a description of the whole situation, the proposal, and right now we're in kind of a review point. We've got enough of it down that we would like to review it with all of our volunteers. Get their feedback, get their ideas. If you see things that you don't think will work well, or things that you think could be improved on if we did this, or move this to there, or whatever it might be, we would really like to have that. And so you can contact me, send me an email. It's r.jensen, Jensen, at IEEE.org, or you can contact any of the other volunteers in the region as well. Dave Henriksen is going to distribute this, and hopefully we'll get a lot of response back to it. Kind of our next step is to change the job descriptions, and I don't see that as being a tremendously big job because the positions at the top, the region director, director-elect, past director, secretary, treasurer, all of those will stay the same. And a lot of the positions that are over here, let's just say in region chapters and all that, are all pretty much written anyway, and we would just be clarifying them as to how they fit into a team. What would be new is these positions, the member engagement, membership transition, and unit engagement. And so we would be pulling together a job description for those positions. That would be the next step. Now, once we've made it through all that, then we want to, of course, socialize this, and if there is agreement that this is the right thing to do, then sometime later this year, we would probably have a region meeting of some sort to review and approve the changes that are necessary to do this. And we're also probably going to, circulate this among other regions and some of the MGA volunteers as well, just to let them know what we're doing. So with that, I'll kind of end. I think that's my review of what we're doing here, and ask again. Would you please give me your feedback? Um, I would really like to hear from you. Any of your comments and so forth. So thank you very much for spending the time listening to this.